This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. NBA is hot and heavy, so much to get into. Really surprised by how some teams are coming out hot right out of the gate. They clearly believe that there is a path forward to give themselves a chance to possibly playing deep into this regular season. And it's obviously how you start, but certainly we'll figure out what these teams are made of when we get to the finish eventually. But so much to get into, man. I can't wait to discuss all things happening in the association. My right-hand man, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC. My brother, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What's good, Mr. Shaw? We are a full week beyond the New Year's, and the NBA has not failed us in giving us new surprises. Like, there's some serious New Year's resolutions with some of the teams that we definitely had low on our radar.
No, I agree with that 100%. 2021 is off to an amazing start, an interesting start for sure. And the NBA continues to churn with news and all kinds of just weirdness happening in and around the association. But that's why we're here, to help these fans and listeners sort through the BS, sort through the madness, and figure out, what we can do with this thing that we call the NBA.
Absolutely, man. And listen, most of the things that we tend to try and discuss and talk about, we clearly want to be outside of the box, but it cannot be helped when things just happen to pop up on our radar. We have to have the honest discussions. And so obviously the most important element that must be discussed is the recent events that took place, Shaw, with the nation's capital, and the rioting that took place by these people that, I'm not using the word protesters. This by no means was considered protesting. These were people who, in my opinion, are anti-American, and everything that they exhibited and everything that they showed me and what was captured on television exhibits the anarchy that happens when you deal with people who don't coherently understand what a democracy means and what it stands for. And to see what was going on, and obviously it's going to be discussed in a couple moments, by how it's impacted not just regular citizens but even the players in the NBA. It just speaks volumes to how far we still need to be at before there is any level of comfort in thinking that this land that we all live on is equitable and giving access for everyone to have a chance to be successful and personally better for life.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think when it comes to those riots, or depending on what side of the fence you are, a protest, whatever, um, you know that the situation would have been different if those people were black, brown, whatever. Right? We know that, and it's just I've never seen anything like it. And the way the NBA, the players, I think the Celtics and Heat game almost did not happen as one of the shining young stars when it comes to this fight of social justice, and even the things that happened in Kenosha as well too. Jalen Brown just again, that guy, he just gets it. He understands, and he just they had to take some time to figure out what they wanted to do. He and Jason Tatum got up and made a collective statement, and just you saw coaches and players all around the league making statements and taking umbrage to what's happening out there. And 2021 is, man, I don't know. I know I said in the beginning of this, like, hey, it's a new year, so forth and so forth, but we're still dealing with a lot of the same bullshit, man. And these players, they recognize that, and it's something that we're going to get into. I think even with Kyrie Irving, because we're not quite sure as to why he's not playing, but some people are speculating as to he just feels like there's bigger things in basketball right now where he can't focus on the game himself. So statements are being made across the league and association at large by players, coaches, and everybody alike.
Absolutely. So we're going to get into a couple of the news and notes, and we'll dive in just a little bit more about our perspective and take about what transpired less than 48 hours ago at the nation's capital. But also, man, we've got a great show on tap. We got to talk about the New York Knicks, y'all. I mean, I can't believe that we can actually have a conversation, an honest conversation about the potential for what the New York Knicks are bringing to the table this upcoming season. Now, I know maybe to some Knicks fans that must mean that we're trying to elevate them to some greater space, pump the brakes a little bit. But I do think that it warrants a conversation about how much better we already see the influence that Tom Thibodeau has. So we'll definitely get into that. And then our topic of the drop, man, it's just crazy how things are just happening crazy quick in the NBA. But the fact that there is honest conversations about the NBA planning to expand. I mean, phenomenal, right? So there's some teams that, or not teams, cities that are in play. We'll weigh in on the potential about whether or not Adam Silver should consider it, should seriously consider these teams, and what this could actually mean for the NBA's future moving forward. So much going on right now. And again, we appreciate everybody hopping on board with this here on the baseline. As always, get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at Game Face Lee, the show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. Available on all the major platforms. You know where to find us. Just look for the baseline. Add us to your playlist. And listen, just allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all things happening in the association. If you want to hear or catch previous episodes of The Baseline, be sure to go to our website, www.thebaselineNBA.com. And for our online radio listeners, you can catch The Baseline via the Nothing But Net Radio Network on Dash Radio, Tuesdays, 1 p.m. All right, so let's get right into it, Shaw. I know that we said that we wanted to spend just a couple of moments on our perspective regarding what happened at the nation's capital. And I led off by just saying that, this to me just really exposes the hypocrisy of the U.S. not really coming to grips with its true understanding of how its own citizens views what this nation really looks like in a black and white perspective. And you highlighted it eloquently in the fact that if this were a Black Lives Matter movement that happened 2 days ago at the nation's capital, there would have been far worse done to the people out there if it was considered so-called protesting, which is what people who are a part of that movement, Black Lives Matter, they were genuinely protesting until Capitol Police and the National Guard decided to apply physical and tactical force on peaceful protesters. But in this situation, when you see these quote unquote pro-Trump rioters running around, white supremacist right-wing people armed with guns, throwing things at the nation's capital, disgracing federal property, and get to take selfies with Capitol Police, to me, it is an absolute double standard. And it was highlighted eloquently by LeBron James, because even he said there are two Americas right now. Now you see that there are two Americas right now. I don't think that any words could have resonated louder than from the king himself in explaining what we saw just a few days ago.
So here's the thing: when we have this conversation, it's not because we wanted to see people beaten, shot, killed, murdered. Like, that's not what we wanted to see, but it did not happen. You know what I mean? Like, those things did not happen to that set of people, that group of people who decided to storm the Capitol building. So it is two Americas, because we don't need it to. We didn't need black and brown people to do it, because we know what would have happened if they did, and that's kind of what it is. I think a lot of people out there, sometimes they feel like, oh well, did you want people to die? Did you want somebody to get beaten and things? No, not at all. But we don't want that at any point, and that's where we see that America is definitely divided in a way that is skewed towards black and brown. And I'm just, it's sickening, and it's disheartening, and it's extremely frustrating. And it could not have been people on the Biden side storming the Capitol building. Like, it couldn't have been for what the news cycle would have looked like if it was the opposite. It's remarkable to see the spin and the coverage that's taken place as a result of this, and some of the denials coming out of some of the Republican camps, if you will, so to speak. And not to say it doesn't really matter what, if you're partisan, non-partisan, it doesn't matter at this stage if you're listening to our show. The reality of the situation is that stuff is completely awry, and that was, I think, a disgraceful showing of people who just decided that, hey, they were going to go there because they were upset that Trump lost the election. Just, what are we doing?
Right, exactly. And look, we don't want to get into the semantics, because this is more than politics. It's about policy. It's about equitable application to people who should be held accountable for their actions. There were people that were out there that were inciting a riot, and there were actual people who are at the highest levels supposed to be defending all Americans, who basically put other Americans' lives in danger. I'm not just talking about the the people in Congress. I'm talking about the police officers, right? Who we obviously have a problem with, because they don't know how to equitably apply and enforce laws regardless of color and skin. But the idea that there are other people, janitors, essential workers, just people who are around that area, that were put in jeopardy because of the recklessness of people using politics in order to elevate some kind of talking point about winning and losing, right? And so it's just amazing to me that it takes sports to bring us back to ground zero in our understanding of, yes, teams win and teams lose, but people win when they understand that it is a game, when they understand that there are far bigger things in this world than what we saw or what we witnessed happening right now. And the fact that people continue to keep perpetuating lies in order to elevate their own insecurities about what they think or don't think is going on here, to me, just further sends a message that we have to stop coddling people on this perception that they're on the same plane as us, so they'll eventually get to where we're getting to about this. No, they don't. And when they do things that harm or jeopardize the basis and the fundamental things that we need in order to thrive in this country, then they become people who are against the principles of this country. When you do things that are against the Constitution, I don't care who you are, what you represent, you are not American. You are more treasonous than the people that are actually being put to jail or being sent away for circumstances that don't even warrant the idea of being labeled such things. And so that's where my anger and frustrations lie, is that we continue to keep letting people pass. There are people who are part of Congress right now who should be held accountable for their actions. And the fact that we're just skirting through this and making it seem like we have to wait for NBA players or people of more stature in order to hollow out the noise and to echo out this type of injustice and understanding about what's happening. This is why people are frustrated, because it's not being equally applied. And I think that's where we need to start more than anything.
Yeah, so I mean, kudos to the NBA for and the players specifically for wanting to speak out, for trying to take stands and continuing the work. And I don't know, with COVID running rampant on top of everything else still, um, and now you have this. I'm very concerned about like what happens like inauguration day and everything kind of after that. I'm very skeptical, and I feel insecure about where we are as a country, and to continue to rely on celebrities and athletes and things like that to try to help lead us, is probably not what we want. We need these politicians to be the ones to lead us, but that might be hoping against hope in some aspects. But 2021 is off to an interesting start, never to say the very, very, very least. And hopefully things are better days are on the horizon. That's all I can hope for.
All right. Now, you mentioned the word COVID, Shaw, so that leads us right into our next topic on news and notes, is the fact that if people are watching the Brooklyn Nets take on the Philadelphia 76ers, the hot Philadelphia 76ers, people noticed that Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant were not on the basketball court. Now, for Kevin Durant, he was off the court because of COVID-19 protocols. Also, it was reported that Michael Porter Jr., who was playing the Denver Nuggets game as well, too, was not on the court due to COVID-19 protocols. But what was most interesting, more than anything, Shaw, Seth Curry was pulled from that game early because he was notified that he tested positive for COVID-19. And because of that circumstances, the Philadelphia 76ers, after their loss, wound up having to stay in Brooklyn. And obviously contact tracing now has to be put in play in order to determine if whether or not additional Sixers players may have contracted the virus as well too. So we knew that this was coming, right? We knew that this was going to get to a point that once the NBA comes out of the unprecedented bubble that allowed virtually no one to contract the virus during those 3-4 months of NBA basketball being played, now the NBA has come down to earth, so to speak, in the same circumstances that we've seen with NCAA football, with NFL football, and with all types of sports. When it's out in the open space, when the players are not in a bubble, this is what comes of it.
This is what comes of it. That situation in Philadelphia is bananas to me. Like I don't know if I quite have a grasp in my brain about exactly what that situation and the deal was there. Because if he knew, then did he leave the court immediately? It's just him not playing. Like I don't know. It's insane. And I heard some quotes from Embiid. He's like, "Listen, I'm going to self quarantine. I have kids and a family. I don't want them to contract the virus. So we're not even sure what Sixers players are going to be available when, how, and where. Like we don't even know right now. And there's some stuff going on in Dallas as well too. So it's hitting home for the NBA. Maybe even sooner than Adam Silver would have thought or would have liked. And they're going to have to figure out a response to this situation sooner than later.
All right. Now, on the other side of it, Sean, we'll really quickly touch on this. Kyrie Irving did not play in that game in which the Nets defeated the Philadelphia 76ers. But the reason why Kyrie Irving wasn't on the court wasn't because of COVID-19. He was on the court because of quote unquote personal reasons. Now, I don't know what that's supposed to translate to, but there have been speculations that Steve Nash and Kyrie Irving are not off to the buddy kind of start that their early on domination of basketball play kind of reflected. And so now there are reports that Kyrie Irving has a problem with the way that Nash is kind of putting together these starting lineups and things of that nature. And so you have mentioned it, man, and I don't want to start throwing out no conspiracy theories about nothing. But even our peoples on the Twitter feed are just like, dude, when we going to start talking about KI about this? I'm like, do we really have the energy to be talking about this kid? He is so, like, there's so much work involved in mentally understanding this kid.
Yeah, shout out to Matt D, our faithful friend and follower of the baseline, kind of bringing this to our attention. And yeah, bro, like I don't quite have the energy and space to deal with the Kyrie madness, but it's already weird in Brooklyn. Like it's always gonna be that.
They say Brooklyn is a planet, bro. They say Brooklyn is a planet,
And it's
but it should not be Mars. Okay? It just shouldn't.
Kyrie is in outer space, my dude. And I don't want to knock.
I liked him better when he said that the Earth was flat. I really did. Like we're just getting beyond now anything like galactically coherent when it comes to Kyrie Irving and his thought process.
But the news is it's still so far wide reaching. Scoop B, who a lot of people like and a lot of people don't like, he's the one who reported that, like Kyrie said, "Hey, I didn't play because I just didn't feel like it." And you can read between the lines in terms of what him not feeling like it, feeling like there's bigger things in basketball to be played right now, or is it the coaching decisions, or is it what's happening just within in the world, or maybe he just didn't feel like playing. Like you just never really know. And so we need to get some more information on here before we can really dive deep into this situation. But again, Brooklyn is it's just not 100%. Hey, it's all hunky dory. It's puppies and rainbows out there. It's not that. There's always got to be something if a Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant guy, those two guys are involved. Again,
All right.
phenomenal talents, but wow.
Well, exactly. Wow. All right. I feel like Post Malone. We just got to Post Malone him. All right. Shaw. Unfortunate news out of Orlando. Markelle Fultz. I think we were trying really hard over the last few years to try to make him one of our young sons, but he's still a work in progress. But he's been so influentially good, and just he's so improved already in the beginning of the season to help the Orlando Magic be as successful as they are in the early outset. He tears his ACL, so he is gone for the season. I know at some point we're going to be addressing the Orlando Magic through the course of this NBA season, but man, what a big blow to lose this guy.
Huge blow in a year that he seemed to really starting to be putting it together. Our guy Gerald Brown, I believe, had picked him for his most improved player of the year, and signs were pointing to that it was as a legit possibility. But to see him go down, non-contact and the way he did, and just holding and gripping onto that leg, your heart breaks for the kid, because he's definitely gone from somebody who became a meme and a joke to somebody who you rooted for and started to figure out his game and started to have some ascension in that aspect. So, Orlando will now rely on the likes of Cole Anthony. So as the rookie, he gets an opportunity to really step in here, and then we'll see what Michael Carter Williams does as well too. So, Orlando playing well and playing great basketball, but now they're gonna be without their point guard for quite some time.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because we've been talking about how they need to start somewhere and building an identity for that team. And, to have a guy like Fultz on the come up, I think really has elevated the play for Michael Carter Williams, has allowed Cole Anthony to kind of grow into his own slowly but surely. But now that's going to be an accelerated process. So I'm really curious to see, how Steve Clifford, puts this team in a different, how he manages this, because again, Markelle Fultz contributions is a big reason why the Orlando Magic right now in the early outset are one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. And finally, Shaw, hey man, we're gonna do this eventually, at some point. I believe in the ideas that sometimes we got to call out good stuff when it's going on, call out bad stuff when it's going down, right? Like, so impressed me Steph Curry and Bradley Beal dropping city. Not fitty, city. Hey man, the shooting snipers are on display in the early outset, and we love it.
It comes off the heels of Curry just being his legacy being challenged for whatever reason for Golden State's tough start, being a slighter frame dude, and he was like, "All right, just watch, just hold up," and dropped 62 points. In that game, I think he was 18 to 19 from the free throw line, hit 8 threes, so a decent amount of threes for sure, but it wasn't like a 13 or 14 point 3 point barrage, so to speak. He was really cutting and getting to the basket and shooting floaters, and again, just living at the free throw line in the way he did. Just an amazing performance there. Then on the flip side with Bradley Beal, 20 of 35 from the floor, just I don't know. I'm working on some new thing right now with shout out to the Persona app. They allow us to have some great conversation with the basketball questions. They do some daily stuff. And one of those things was Bradley Beal. Is Bradley Beal, or why is Bradley Beal underrated? And I'd say, Beal's just not a flashy guy. Like, he gets his points, but he's not breaking ankles. He's not necessarily dunking over people. He's not shooting 35 footers like even Steph and Dame do. He's just getting it done. And that 60 kind of goes underrated. So he's a guy who's going to be very heavily sought after this offseason, or even during this season, especially if Washington can't turn things around.
Yeah, and I also attribute the fact that he's playing out of Washington, and I think now that he's playing next to Russell Westbrook, I think that he's going to be elevated in a different way if he's going to continue to have performances like this. Sometimes you need to kind of ride on the back of someone already popular for you to kind of build your own, persona, right, as they say. And I think that's what's going to take place. And I think with Steph Curry, man, this is exactly what people are saying is going to wind up having to either recognized. It's going to really determine whether or not the Warriors are going to be playing in or playing out of the playoffs. They're going to have to see more performances like this, and I don't think it's fair that you know I don't think it's fair that you do that. But at the same time, this is why he's a two-time NBA MVP. And you have to elevate yourself to that point if you recognize that this is what it's going to take in order to put your team in the best position to win.
For sure. And one last news and note thing as we're recording here, breaking news in some ways, and definitely couldn't come a minute too soon for the Timberwolves, who are struggling, bro. Karl Anthony Towns looks like he'll be making his return to the court over the course of the weekend. So, shouts to Cat, and be excited for him to get back on the roster, because this Timberwolves teams, they need him, man, because they look rough out there without him.
Fell in that death in that abyss, right? Taking them L's, man. Wow. So much again, so many news and notes. And it's great to see that we can have great conversation and discussion about these things that are going down. So much more. But we definitely want to hear from you as well too. So be sure to get us at NBA Baseline. Coming up, Shaw and I are going to be talking about the New York Knicks. What is going on out here in the Big Apple? I mean, first it was supposed to be all about Brooklyn, but it looks like Tom Thibodeau and his boys say, "Pump the brakes, baby. We were here. We were doing this before Brooklyn came into the picture." Well, can they maintain? We will talk about the success right here on the Baseline. Time to break it down. This is the Baseline. Cal Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Time now for the breakdown, as we discuss the team that I don't think anybody anticipated would be at the early outset as successful as not what the record reflects, but as the way that they are playing the game of basketball. And that is the New York Knicks. If people are not paying attention right now, the New York Knicks are really being recognized as one of the most competitive teams in the early outset of this NBA season. And while everybody does not have like the greatest confidence in the world that they can sustain this to be in the upper echelon or maybe even the lower echelon, whatever the case may be, just the simple fact that we are seeing quality basketball being played. And it's really all in part to the influence of Tom Thibodeau and how he is now taking a stranglehold on trying to develop a winning culture there at the Garden. It's remarkable, Shaw, because we talked about hoops redemption in our previous episodes, like a couple episodes ago, and we never did one where we say coach's redemption. But if there's anyone who would be a top candidate for coach's redemption right now, it would be Tom Tibbs and the job that he's doing for the New York Knicks.
Can't dispute it. Really, this Knicks team, for whatever reason, has figured out in the early part of the season a way to play competitive and competent basketball, primarily on the defensive end. Third in opponent's points per game, eighth in defensive rating. Sure, the offense still has a little bit desired, especially with RJ Barrett struggling from the field, shooting only 39%, but he's averaging 17 and 7. You look at the raw numbers, you're like, oh, wow. And then Julius Randle. Contract year, Julius Randle is a different dude.
Oh, talk about yo. Listen, he was my original young son before we came up with the concept of young sons. But I know you of all people, Mr. Shaw. You of all people, man. You had him ready to. He's ready to be orphaned, man. You already you were putting him on the chopping block, the selling block. You had that boy already out the door
And
begging for change.
the
Begging for
jacked
change.
up thing is, like we've said before, like I don't dislike him, and I think he's a very skilled basketball dude. The problem last year was he came in with this attitude of like, F it, ain't nobody else y'all gonna do nothing. So I'll go ahead and shoot this thing. Don't worry about you, RJ. Don't worry about you, Kevin Knox. I got it. And while some of that is still in place, he's very high usage. His productivity, especially when it comes to assisting and playmaking this year, 7 assists as we record this podcast right now. Like, who is this dude? Like, what's happening right now? This dude is all of a sudden become Jokic. You know what I mean? Diving players left and right.
Can I throw something out at you really quick, Shaw? Because I think, to me, this is part of the reason why I really liked Julius Randle. And I felt like the Los Angeles Lakers missed on a great opportunity for having this guy still on their roster. Now, I get it. They had their own agenda and really their own mess to clean up. Like, Julius Randle came at a bad time where the Los Angeles Lakers were, right? There was a lot of internal conflict, management conflict, everything like that. But one of the things that I noticed about Julius Randle, especially when he was coming out of the University of Kentucky, this was a high energy type of player. The guy, like, even though he looked like he was out of shape, there was something that was just waiting to happen if he was going to get on the next level, that he was going to do everything he can to dispel this perception that his game can't translate to being productive and successful. And you know how we talk about empty calorie numbers and things of that nature? That, to me, is what was profiled about Julius Randle last year playing for the New York Knicks. But keep this in his perspective. Julius Randle playing for the New York Knicks that isn't under Tom Thibodeau, those numbers look like empty calories. Julius Randle doing what he's doing now, and then couple that with the fact that he's actually playing next to guys that actually play with the same energy that he plays. And I'm not saying that he's not responsible for how he was playing last year. But what I'm saying is that he, to me, looks like he's given the same thing. The energy's a little bit different because he's playing under, I think, a head coach that really believes in him. And now you're seeing it kind of permeating through other players. Like, it looks a lot better than what it represented last year. And to me, that is what I've always appreciated about Julius Randle, is that he'll consistently keep being that guy scoring the points, getting the rebounds. But then if he adds a little something, it doesn't feel like it's fabricated. It feels like there's a genuine intent that he wants to go out there and help teams win. And I think this is the situation when you got a coach that recognizes that. He rewards the coach by saying, hey, I'm going to go out there and score those points. Hey, I'm going to go out there and do these other. He doesn't have to be a captain, but that's what I've seen from Julius Randle, and I appreciate that about him. He's maintained this, and I believed in it, and I still see it. Do I know if it's going to make the Knicks a better basketball team? Don't know. But I know that Julius Randle has got game, and now he's being rewarded for it because it is helping this team win basketball.
May I remind you, it's also a contract here. So I think.
I know.
Listen, I don't want to be.
I didn't say. Listen, you put it out there, right? It's a contract year, but maybe Tom Tibbs recognizing that and said, "Hey, look. You may not be my young son after next year because you may be too expensive for my blood. But if you want to get that money, right? You don't want to be like Nerlens Noel. You want to buy into yourself rather than the league buying into you. You don't have to do this for me."
And technically, his contract is just not fully guaranteed next year. But at this rate, it's looking like he is somebody who the Knicks can truly, truly rely on. And the fact that Obi Toppin has missed as much time as he has as well too. I mean, that's playing into maybe some of the plus minutes Randall's averaging right now, almost 39 minutes a game. Toppin would presumably cut into some of that, unless they decided to maybe shift Randall to play some small ball five as well. But he's playing right now at the level that I would have hoped, Michael Beasley would have been at some point in his career, right? Like that just never really materialized. And we'll see if it's sustainable. But let's not, just give all the credit to Randall while he deserves a great majority of it, along with Tom Thibodeau. But shout out to Alfred Payton. He's shooting almost 50% from the field and still controlling the game. Their draft pick, Emmanuel Quigley, when he's played, has played great basketball as well, too, specifically in spurts, getting some contributions from Bullock as well. Like, there's a cast off type of roster.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Are we not
Well,
forgetting
he kind
Austin
of just came
Rivers?
back. I'll give him
Austin Rivers, you know
he's
what
been
I'm
here the
saying?
last couple of games, 3 games.
Hey man, listen, the New York Knicks, look, the two things that are going to stand out to me about the New York Knicks. One, they can be a team that's either going to be competitive, right? And maybe win a game. And I'm talking about prior to Thibodeau, or they're a team that just gets blown out. This is a basketball team that seems to stay competitive through and through. And sometimes it comes down to what the Knicks do in the fourth quarter. Just the other night, I saw Austin Rivers drop 14 in the fourth quarter, 23 points coming off the bench. This is a guy who probably come in there, yelp and scream and, say, I deserve to be a starter, especially when we're talking about the backcourt of the New York Knicks. But he's coming in and he's flowing right along with what Tom Thibodeau needs and wants. And he has already become like a fan favorite right now because of the way that he is, commanding the floor and the way that he's coming off the bench and contributing for the New York Knicks. And again, I'm just saying, we could put this all on whether or not this is all Tom Tibbs, whatever. I'm just saying that there's a different feel to how the New York Knicks are trying to play games. It's going to be hard for us to keep saying that the New York Knicks are going to get blown out against every single team because the way that these guys are playing makes it very
No, I
difficult for them
agree.
to
Again,
get
they,
blown
they
out.
seem to be doing a decent job defensively right now. Alec Burks is another guy who hasn't played in a week or two now. He's only played the first 3 games, but was giving them 20 points per game off the bench. Spelling Bullock and even giving them another secondary playmaker. And Knicks just seem to have a different vibe about them. And to your point with Austin Rivers, I just saw a quote. I think it was yesterday who he was saying, like, "Listen, I've been on bad teams, and this isn't one of them." And it's easy to say that right now when things are going well, as we record 5-3. So hey, I predicted them to be down in the doldrums with the Cleveland Cavaliers as a 14 and 15 seeds in the Eastern Conference. And
Sure. The way that we were predicting this team, Shaw, we didn't even think they were going to have 5 wins by the halfway point of this season, right? They only had 15 last year, and they've already made up a quarter of that in just the first 8 games, which tells you that as long as they maintain a level of competitiveness and hey, they don't suffer severe injuries that quote unquote hamper your quality players, your Julius Randles, your RJ Barretts, Elfrey Payton, if he's going to play this kind of level, the Knicks are going to be in basketball games. They're simply going to be in basketball because there are other teams right now that we can easily be talking about that have not gotten off to a good start, not gotten off to a decent start. And if the Knicks happen to run against them, on their schedule over the next couple of weeks, hey, we're easily talking about this team making up the 15 wins before we get to the halfway point. And that to me is a good sign of a team that's trending upward. Now, are they overachieving? We won't be able to find that out until maybe another 8 games are being played. But to tell me that they've won 5 of the first 8 games that they've played to me is far more impressive than I think I ever would have imagined. If I was setting goals for the New York Knicks, I don't even think I would have even set that goal. I'd have been just happy if they'd have said, hey, can you just be competitive for the first 4 games that we play so I can at least see if we can win a game? The fact that they have 5 wins already under their belt to me, just absolutely impressive
and
in
they have
the
opportunity
Atlantic
to still
Division,
improve,
right?
especially if they get Toppin back. You know what I mean? Nerlens Noel gets a little bit more comfortable quickly, just develops a little bit, et cetera, et cetera. RJ Barrett comes out of his shooting slump and not shooting 39%. And right now, they're what are they like 27th? I think it is in turnovers right now. So if they clean that up and get to like a league average 14, 15, that's a couple extra positions that they're not giving away, and then they're right there. One of the things, along with their defense, that I didn't talk about before, but they're first right now in defending the three, 29% from the 3-point line their opponents are shooting against them. So Tibbs is doing something right there. They just signed Taj Gibson to give them some more front court depth. He loves his guys, so he gets Taj Gibson to come out there. They were looking at Tyson Chandler as well at some point. Mitchell Robinson giving them almost 2 blocks and a steal and a half a game. Like the defense is there right now for New York, and that's how they're making their hay. In addition to Randall hitting some ridiculous shots, I just don't know his going back to him, his ability to hit shots with the guys draped over him and fading away so far in the first, 8 games of the year. I just didn't see this coming. He's just become a guy who's just been kind of lights out, when it comes to his offensive capability.
All right, so I'm going to cross the streams like Ghostbusters with you, Shaw, because I want to quickly talk about two important elements. First, the emergence of Emmanuel quickly, and what his contributions means to the New York Knicks. I don't see him as somebody that's going to win Rookie of the Year, but I certainly think that if you can give me somebody to watch for that could be an ascending pop, like an ascending star, like someone who can be on the come up to really help this team moving forward, like in year 2, year 3. Emmanuel quickly has certainly put himself in that conversation. And then on the flip side of it, what about Kevin Knox? Like, this is a kid who the New York Knicks had a lot of high hopes and promise for. And if you're telling me that the Knicks now went ahead and have signed Taj Gibson to a veteran favored coach like Tom Thibodeau, for a guy that's already only getting 21 minutes now, right? What does that mean in where he falls in the depth chart as it pertains to what the Knicks are going to need and what they're going to be relying
Knox is
upon moving
such an
forward?
interesting case scenario. Ironically, give Persona a second shout out here. Knox was another question in the Persona app this past week as well too. Like, hey, where do you see Kevin Knox as a high level?
I'm just knocking him out the box, baby. I'm just knocking it out the box. Don't think that I've been trying to hit up on Persona to throw these questions out at you. I'm just saying it's just flying off the top, and it seems like me and Persona are we're completing each other. I
Love it,
complete
right?
Persona.
And
Persona
it just
completes
boils
me.
down to, do we see Knox as a high level role player, a potential all star? Like what? Like where does it lie? I think one answer is, hey, this dude's gonna be out of the league. He's gonna be in Europe sometime soon. I was like, yikes, bro. Like that's crazy. But in this Knicks team and this roster, I mean, 21 minutes a night isn't, again, that's decent role playing minutes. What he's doing with the 21 minutes is maybe not as impressive. He's had a couple of games where he was instrumental, especially in the game against the Atlanta Hawks. I think he had 14 or 16, something like that, and really helped the Knicks maintain and secure that W. So there's flashes there, but Tibbs is going to make him earn it 100%. But when it comes to Knox, and I'll even throw it back to even a guy like Randall or Alfred Payton or whatever, what do you think this Knicks team should do? Should they sell while the getting is good and maybe see if they can maximize? And most teams they're not really going to want to try to make a move until maybe the first month of the season, so to speak. Maybe end of January. They're like, all right, let's see where things are at. But if you're the Knicks, are you burning up the phone lines like, hey, you know what? Because sure, you're playing well, but how sustainable is this? Like, how far could you really go with this team and this roster? That remains to be seen. So if you're Leon Rose, are you on the phone lines like, hey, bro, Julius Randle, what about that? Can you get some draft picks or some other young talent for him, or Alfred Payton or Knox? Like, would you try to make a move if you're the Knicks and their general management?
I don't know if I would. Well, let me put it like this. I don't know if I would, because if people are favoring what we're seeing from the New York Knicks, and New York Knicks fans are much different than, say, Oklahoma City Thunder fans, right? So when Sam Presti saw how successful his team really was with Chris Paul, there's no way that he could have moved Chris Paul, given the fact that he just finished moving Russell Westbrook. So he's stuck like Chuck because his team is completely overachieving. But this is a different type of scenario with the New York Knicks, because New York Knicks fans are loyal. They're loyal to the Knicks and the organization, despite this organization running this team into the ground so many times over, screwing over the team's success so many times over, always falling short, never making the right decisions. People can get along with a team that wants to compete and wants to give them a reason to come and watch them play. And so if you decide to do that because you feel compelled to try and move a player like Julius Randle, who may actually become a favorite to people, who may not be talking a lot of smack because now his numbers mean something to these people, I don't know, man. Knicks fans may feel a little funny about that. So to me personally, if this team is going to continue to trend in this direction and play in this kind of way, you really are going to have to sell me on what is this Knicks plan moving forward with what you currently have. Because if you really think about it, it isn't because this team is being led by RJ Barrett. RJ Barrett looks impressive. It isn't because they're being led by Obi Toppin. Obi Toppin can be a highlight reel, but we've seen nothing yet that's going to determine whether or not you're going to put the hopes and the pillars of success for the Knicks on just those two players. But guys like Randall, guys like Rivers, you know what I'm saying? Mitchell Robinson, Emmanuel Quickly in this to me is what's starting to bubble up the whole rummaging and conversation about, can we take the New York Knicks seriously? And people enjoy that. New York Knicks fans here, they enjoy that. They're eating this stuff up. So to upset that because you're trying to go for the gusto, we've seen what happens when the Knicks start throwing out, you know what I'm saying, their cachet about bringing quality players to the Garden and everything like that, man. Either mess up the chemistry, you mess up the organization. I just don't know if you do it right now.
I feel like you just kind of have to play it out and see how good this team can be, and then maybe it makes you attractive for free agents, so forth. As you move forward. Um, I just I don't think there'd be enough cachet built on these players and their credibility, given especially where they're coming from in general, where it seems to be like, you know what? Yeah, I believe in this 8 games, Julius Randle. I believe in Alfred Payton and so forth and so forth. Hey, I'm willing to take a chance on Kevin Knox. I think Leon Rose and Thibs, they're just going to have to play this out and just see how far this Knicks and how good this Knicks team really is. And I think that's a great move if they do decide to do that, because I don't know. And if they can shock the world and somehow make it into the play-in tournament and, God forbid, make the playoffs, then that's a very successful season for the New York Knicks.
One last thought, Shaw, and I think it's something that I want to highlight because maybe everybody's thinking my fervor and fever is about me talking about Julius Randle in such a high regard. I think what I'm saying is Julius Randle going to be your number one option for the New York Knicks? I don't think so. But I do think that if you've got a player like Julius Randle playing at this kind of level with Tom Thibodeau, I think it enhances the cachet of bringing somebody along, bringing veteran guys who are perennial stars or superstars who just want to have an opportunity to get out there and play in a prestigious place like the Garden and think that they do have a legitimate chance at helping them hoist a trophy, which hasn't been done in some 50-something years when you're talking about the New York Knicks. So I think that the ascension of Julius Randle and what he can bring to the table continues to be something that will be talked about. Now, I have an interesting question for you, Shaw. Given what we're seeing from Julius Randle, and we had this conversation last week, my question to you is this real quick. If Julius Randle maintains these numbers, would he be the outright most improved player in the NBA? Would he win that award?
He would lap Kyle Anderson, who we discussed last week. Kyle Anderson would just have to all right, sorry, bro, I see you got it. You know what
I mean? Would it be Usain Bolt kind of quick, or would it be like sloth?
No slow mo kind of. That guy is electric, and if he can maintain even a fraction of this pace, so let's say he doesn't average 23, 12, and 7, but he gets down to even 20 if he's still 20, 10, and 5.5 or something like that, no doubt. Just stop it. Give them the award right away.
You mean Max Kellerman, no doubt. No doubt. You know what I'm saying? Make Max Kellerman sound like he part of the Wu-Tang Clan, no doubt.
The most improved player award it's not about, is your team most improved, but it may actually be the case for the Knicks and Julius Randle. So if he can even make them sniffing the 500 mark and he's still a 20, 10, and 4 or 5 assist guy, get out of here, bro. I think it would be nuts not to give him the award despite how many years he's been in the league.
All right. Well, the New York Knicks, again, one of the most impressive teams in the early outset of this NBA season, one of the top defensive teams, and clearly their offense is a work in progress. But Tibbs' influence on this team has definitely made the New York Knicks a team to watch for so far in the early outset of this NBA season. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Breakdown. Time now for the drop. Callie Warren Shaw, The Baseline NBA. You know how we do, man. Great topic for the drop this week. And shout outs to Adam Silver, because without him pontificating about the circumstances of this topic, I don't think we would have this on our docket, right? So right now, there's been a lot of conversation about the possibilities for the NBA to expand. Now, it's been a while since that conversation really has even been had. I don't know if you want to chalk it up to the elevated success of the NBA and its revenue and growth over the last few years. And obviously, that's in due part to some of the great players that are still currently doing its thing. But if there is any conversation about expansion, it clearly means that Adam Silver and his committees feel very comfortable about putting the NBA in different places. And especially now when we're dealing with such a unique circumstance with the COVID-19 pandemic and how the game has been kind of been marginalized in some respects. When and if eventually we get out of these circumstances, where does a sport like the NBA choose to go? Does it choose to stay on the same path, or does it try to expand itself? And so the idea that there is a possibility of expansion with the $2.5 billion buy-in, Shaw, to me speaks volumes about how Adam Silver sees the growth of the sport and where he believes the possibilities of the game's fandom can continue to expand.
Yeah. Opening up to expansion is all about league sustainability and just trying to create a great influx of cash. So you're looking at, I think it was $167 million that would go out to the remaining teams if a $2.5 billion buy-in was a minimum amount. Some other complications still loom with this too. The Timberwolves are still reportedly for sale. That report came out over the summer, where with a Garnett led, I think, buyer group was interested, and then that fell through. Then another group was interested. So there's some other teams that would need to be involved in, or the Minnesota Timberwolves need to get situated first. But to be looking at expansion at this point now and to know when it would actually take place is another conversation for another day. But it just goes to show you that the league is not only trying to increase its popularity, but is also trying to increase its profitability and make sure that it can stop the windfall that COVID has definitely impacted on the league
I
itself.
have an interesting question to ask you. I just thought about this before we get into some of the underlying or outline topics regarding the NBA's considerations for expansion. If you are the Minnesota Timberwolves, and let's say there is a legitimate buyer, but he is somebody that believes that the team should be moved, are you a proponent of a team being moved to another city? Or are you a proponent of, hey, if this guy wants to own a team and he wants to own it in wherever it is that he wants the stadium or the arena, I'm sorry, the arena to be built, why doesn't he just develop that team being built rather than taking a team and actually moving them? Are you about movement for a team, or are you about shelving the team? Um, if in fact there is no there's no legitimate revenue coming in this in the team sustainability at that location is dormant for any considerable period of time, and then the league chooses to contract if that ever came to it.
I think you just need to have a comprehensive economic study of what the team's finances are, what their profitability is, what they and over years and maybe even decades of time in some aspect. I think I'd be more in mind of just like kind of expanding and figuring out where you can add two new teams, and then do you do relocation of those teams? I mean, sorry, of the existing teams, I don't think so. I don't think you really relocate the cities. You would potentially have to move teams out of or into conferences. So with some of the expansion conversation that's already been had, there it would seem like there are two West heavy favorites, which would mean some teams that are kind of on the borderline, and maybe even a team like Minnesota or New Orleans could potentially then now have to move to the Eastern Conference in some capacity if some of the two Western favorites were to actually get their way. Now, again, those are the favorites, when it comes to them. But there could be some other teams on the East Coast or more in the central part of the country that maybe would get some viability. Not too sure, but that's the conversation that I guess we would need to have now to kind of figure out where things should potentially lie when it comes to expansion.
For me, simply for me, I never liked the idea of a buyer, a group coming in, purchasing a team, realizing that they can't get their way when it comes to negotiating an arena or whatever, you know, um, stipulations that they're trying to, negotiate with regards to the city, and choose to move the team to a different location, assuming that they're going to try and keep the same name or the same, the history of that team moves along with the group. I never liked that. Like I appreciated the fact that when the Seattle Supersonics died out, so to speak, and the owner group moved the team from Seattle to Oklahoma City. They came up with the Oklahoma City Thunder. The only bad part about it is that they drafted Kevin Durant, and when they drafted Kevin Durant was a Supersonic, and so. But the idea and the essence and the history of the Supersonics should always stay with Seattle. It should not move along with other teams, like when the Charlotte Hornets moved to New Orleans and they became the New Orleans Hornets, and then they decided, oh, we're now going to call ourselves the Pelicans, and then finally Charlotte was able to reclaim that name being the Hornets. There was history with the Hornets, and I think, to me, with the NBA, and I don't mean to sound old fogey, old schoolish or nothing like that, there's just a lot of history that comes with teams that have been there for a sustained period of time. And when ownership groups can't get along with cities and choose to move teams or whatever the case may be, their personal beef with the city or nothing like that should not extend itself where you're compromising the history of a franchise and where it came from, where it originated from, in order for you to say, well, we're taking the legacy of that team to other places because we think that their fan base can appreciate it better or appreciate it more. And like, to this point where we're talking about the Seattle like the city of Seattle, whom Mayor Jenny Durkin has said she feels very optimistic about the ideas of Seattle getting back a basketball franchise. I think people in Seattle who now truly appreciate not having professional basketball while having professional baseball and professional football, they're going to do their due diligence to make sure that it stays now, here, and forevermore. Whereas where some other places, if you're doing it because it sounds like a hot spot like Vegas, I don't know about that. Like, what? Because there's sports gambling and there's a lot of revenue to be made from that? Okay, fine, I get that. But just as easily, are the fan base truly about watching basketball the same way that they like going to watch football or watching college basketball or things of that nature? I'm just a little uncertain of that.
I think it's just a matter of how much work does the league or whatever franchise do they want to do. A city like Vegas, been there. It's one of my favorite cities for sure. They are Laker fans out there. So now if a NBA team, a men's team comes in there, can you win over that fan base that has been rooting for the Lakers for forever, really, at the end of the day? The Aces are there, the WNBA team, and would they welcome that opportunity to have, a brother team over there, or were they just kind of like, hey, we are the basketball in this city and in this town? And that's where, I wonder. I'm one of those weird people that is like, I'm not against Seattle, but I'm not like gung ho like it has to go back there. Like, if it does, it does. Great. And I'm still not from that area, so I'm not trying to piss off people in Seattle. But like, it doesn't. The nostalgia of it isn't holding for me in the way that I think it does for everybody else. Where it's like, oh, Seattle has to be the first team and the
Was
first
it
city to
because
get it back.
But is it because Portland has a basketball team already there?
I mean, you're talking about Pacific Northwest area for sure. It's like, all right, there's a team in that area, and that I think that region can get behind, so to speak, especially with as currently constructed with the great superstar in Damian Lillard right now,
Well,
right? So
let me throw this out there at you, Shaw, because uniquely, you would think that there needs to be great rivalries in the state of California if you essentially have four basketball teams playing in that state, right? The Golden State Warriors, the Los Angeles Clippers, the Los Angeles Lakers, and the Sacramento Kings, right? I think for a lot of people who are out in that Pacific Northwest, they miss the possible rivalries of the Portland Trailblazers and Seattle Supersonics. And I think people genuinely miss some of those mountainous rivalries where there is the Denver Nuggets versus the Seattle Supersonics or the Portland Trailblazers, kind of hand in hand. I think it enhances the Northwest Division. And I'm not trying to diss Minnesota or nothing like that. I'm not saying that if you send them to the Eastern Conference that they will make better. But I just wonder if whether or not the Minnesota Timberwolves belong in that Northwest Division with the likes of the Utah Jazz or the likes of the Denver Nuggets and those type of teams, and maybe putting them in the Eastern Conference might benefit a little bit better playing against the Milwaukee Bucks and the Indiana Pacers. And like, I feel like there's more of a genuine regional feel to rivalry when a team like that goes over there and plays against them a little bit more often than the teams that are further west of them.
Agreed. And I don't know. Maybe it's just not necessarily realignment, but maybe just renaming even the divisions than that of itself as well too. So, uh,
Well,
eh,
but you and I have said, Charlotte, I think that divisions are going to become obsolete because of the way that the NBA continues to change its rules.
well,
Right.
I
I
think
don't know if there's any more validity to the divisions any longer, except for us just talking about how this team is good, and we're looking at how many teams are going to probably make the playoffs coming out of their, with the records that they're going to represent out of their own divisions.
I don't think the divisions will matter if they were to expand to two teams because then now you have 32 teams, but then that would make the divisions uneven. So you would
Right.
almost have to obliterate the divisional concept and just say, all right, Eastern Conference, Western Conference, and that's it.
Right.
Because yeah, like otherwise you have one team with six instead of five. Like that's you just can't do that. So there's a lot of logistical things in terms of even the schedule. I would encourage readers to go out there or our listeners to go out there. Great article by CBS. I think his name Sam Quinn. He wrote an article on the whole expansion deal and kind of even going into the logistical nightmares of scheduling that goes into the potential of expansion as well. But let's talk a little bit more about teams and cities where you like. So we talked about Seattle, talked about Las Vegas. What other areas would you like to see be considered when it comes to expansion, real quick?
For me, oh wow. I don't think I'd mind seeing a team coming out of, man, this is tough because I just feel like there's so many other teams out west, that are kind of like brand new. Um, I don't know if I'd mind seeing a team out of South Carolina. Um, and I say that because I do think that in certain places where there's considered small market, there's also potential for great regional rivalry games. I feel like there's just such a gap with where the Charlotte Hornets are, that I just feel like, they're just misplaced because you're saying they play the Southeast Division. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. You know what I mean? So if you did put a potential team there, but again, I think of expansion in the sense of where does great basketball get played to attract fan base? You know what I mean? And listen, I do say too that South Carolina is a growing area, where there is a lot of potential, and if people continue to migrate there, you know, that's always a good thing for the business of basketball, where it could be an epicenter because it would be a true professional area of where sports can be played, and it's a one of a kind place, right? There's no professional baseball, there's no professional football, there's only college. But if you have a professional basketball team there, I mean, it could certainly make way for people's desire to want to see more professional basketball being played. So I'm thinking outside of the box. What about you?
I'm way outside the box. So, um, Mexico City is something that's been mentioned. The league created some sort of a training facility in the Mexico area that's supposed to serve for South Central South America, the Caribbean, et cetera, et cetera. Like all players there are supposed to be able to go to that location. I think that'd be an interesting case scenario for the league. Especially when it comes to the international market and not necessarily international because Puerto Rico is a commonwealth, but I think Puerto Rico would be an interesting case scenario as well too.
Well,
Players would
I've
be
also been
clamoring.
oh yeah, I've been a proponent that if the NBA is looking to expand, like they really should consider a team in the Caribbean. Now, you
Oh, don't
mentioned
get me
Puerto
started,
Rico.
bro.
Yeah, I
Don't
know.
get me
Listen, you
started.
mentioned you mentioned Puerto Rico. I'm much more favorable to the Caribbean islands, legit, right? Like Barbados or Jamaica, or you know what I'm saying. Like I'm more of that kind of style, thinking that that's where you should probably do that. Listen, they've played games in the Bahamas. And that could certainly be a potential theme type of thing.
I
I
mean,
don't
just
know if
take
that's the
just
best
take my
place.
whole soliloquy. Why don't you?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, no, no. Well, I was going to follow up with you and saying I like how you're thinking outside the box because you're thinking from an international perspective. I was thinking more domestically. But to your point, yes, I think that the possibilities of Mexico City, we talked about this before we jumped on and started doing this show. I believe, hey, if why be afraid to go and put a second team out in Canada, right? I just think that Montreal is a great place. I think where the NBA failed is that they tried to put themselves in a place that I just don't think identifies mainly basketball, was mainly hockey when they had Vancouver. But I think Montreal is a great location. It is a great locale for people who go up and want to visit and see what Canada is all about. They're not, as far as distance goes, not far up, driving from Jersey to Montreal. They already have professional sports with the Montreal Canadiens. They had the Montreal Expos. I think that it still is a good get for the NBA if they were to put a team up there as well too.
Yeah, so for me again, I'll just finish off. Like I said, Mexico I think is an interesting case scenario. I'm very interested in if they would look at Puerto Rico because I think players would love to live in that area for reasons maybe that are not necessarily
Hola,
basketball related.
Puerto.
But as you alluded to,
100%, baby, big put. Yeah, okay.
but as we alluded to again, with us both being of West Indian descent, I mean, to see the NBA expand to the Caribbean, the true Caribbean, not that Puerto Rico is not, but of the West Indian nature, like a Jamaica or the Bahamas or someplace like that too, and what that could do for the infrastructure of even of those countries and islands would be just tremendous. So I think Bahamas would probably have the the inside track of most of those other islands, with the exception of Puerto Rico, so to speak. But those would be my bets: Mexico, Puerto Rico, or the Bahamas. Pick two of those three, and I'd be just fine.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I know we would be so like talk about trying to get them press passes, right?
Give me an all-star game in Puerto Rico, fam. Holy hell.
Man, forget that. Give me that all-star in Jamaica, man. I'm talking about right next to the Appleton Rum Estate. Right there, baby. So it's time, baby.
They're not ready. They're not ready. It's interesting though. I mean, this is a conversation for maybe for another day because with us being of Jamaican heritage and descent, I think Puerto Rico or Mexico, like you'd feel like they do want to make sure that they can continue to attract the Hispanic market as well too. But if they were go to Mexico or Puerto Rico and just feeling like, okay, can we get that Latin influence, that deeper Latin influence into our league? But if you pick a Jamaica or the Bahamas and really try to build like that other part of the West Indies, if you will, that would be again, it would just be so unique and so uniquely rich for the diversity aspect of the league and what everything that they're trying to do. And for a lot of us out there, like you and I, we know the difference between a Jamaican, a Bahamian, a Bayesian, or Trinidadian. Like we know that, and some people don't. You know what I mean? They think everybody in the Caribbean says, "Hey, man," like that's not what life is about. So to get that education would be just so great, I think, for the league in that of itself too. So I'm with you, bro. It can go either way. Again, obviously I'd love to see our homeland, Jamaica, get it. I just feel like Bahamas is probably a little bit more palatable. I think in some ways for what the league would try to do if they'd even look at it, if they'd even look at a West Indian market to begin with.
Yeah, man. I'm totally down for that and completely for that possibility and that idea. And Adam Silver, don't hesitate to give us a shout, man, because we'll definitely put you on where the best rum is. Okay. Awesome show altogether, man. Great topics top of conversation. And we definitely want to hear from you guys, man. If you were Adam Silver and you're considering locations, where would you like to see the NBA expand? Be sure to get at us at NBA Baseline. Mr. Shaw, once again, I appreciate you being my partner in crime for us as we continue to move these things forward. First show of 2021, essentially. And hey, man, I mean, the first recording into 2021. Let me put it properly that way. Good things all around, man. And again, a lot for us to be keeping our eye out for as this season moves on.
It don't stop, and we won't stop either. So, shouts out to our fans and listeners. Make sure you tune in to this episode and all episodes of the Baseline. Follow us on some of our social media platforms as well too. We're putting out some great stuff on Instagram. We're doing a new segment on Fridays, our Friday Five, kind of just picking 5 things that are catching our eye. In addition to, as I alluded to, third time shout out for the Persona app. Might even see us on the Locker Room app. You never know, man. The Baseline is going to be popping up all over anywhere NBA basketball is being discussed and talked about, man.
I love it, man. I love it. So for the Baseline, Callie, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. You know we do. And we'll catch up with you next time.